You're watching us live from Ngaoundéré in the Adamawa region of Cameroon. It is time for the news here on DBS Television. We begin with the headlines. Cameroon joins the international community today to commemorate World Desertification Day. It is a day to raise awareness on land conservation so as to let it support a sustainable living for it to produce and for mankind to consume. All these can be forfeited if the land is not taken proper care of. As Cameroon prepares for major elections in the near future, Women's International League for Peace and Freedom maps the way for a peaceful election. A training session to that effect was organized today in Douala to prepare members of the Women's Situation Room activists and other stakeholders ahead of time. Decent work, social justice, and fight against discrimination were the main point of discussion in a workshop that was organized today in Douala to make public capacity building through international labor standards. The initiative was the brainchild of the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. Details of these stories and more next in the news. Please do not go away. We'll be right back. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the midweek edition of the Primetime Newscast here on DBS Television. Today is the 27th of June, 2018. We begin with this brief in sports. The matches that took place in the first match for today was Mexico versus Sweden. These teams are already qualified, although Sweden beat Mexico 3-0. South Korea equally beat Germany 2-0, but South Korea and Germany are both eliminated from the competition. The current match pitting Switzerland versus Costa Rica and Serbia versus Brazil, they are on halftime now. Switzerland is leading Costa Rica 1-0, while Brazil is leading Serbia 1-0 as well. The Women's International League for Peace and Freedom has organized a training session on Cameroon women for a peaceful election. The session brought together members of the Women's Situation Room activists and media men and women. Rail Uliabia was part of that meeting and brought back this report.
Conflict-driven factors within the electoral process, stakes of risk and prevention was the subject that grouped civil society organizations, activists, plus media men and women at Bone and Jaw. They have the objective to propose solutions, recommendations, and guidelines for the operationalization of the Women's Situation Room initiated by the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, Cameroon. The Women's Situation Room that is up to facilitate the electoral process for the female folk.
We are part of what we call the Women's Situation Room, which is a process that enables women and youth to play a very important part in the conduction of peaceful election before, during, and after by taking all peace initiative at those different periods. So, because what we are going to do, what we are doing is to be able to prevent conflict and build peace during the electoral period is important. As we are going to observe, we observe on the field to see what can cause conflict and take the lead to inform the competent authorities so that action is taken well ahead of time.
Looking at the political situation in the country, the electoral period is quite conflictual, with violence being imminent, is considered as a social malady that needs to be well handled.
Unless people come back to our traditions, which mean that sitting together, talking together, sharing views, disputing but finally coming to a consensus, this is the way Africa acts or behaves. In a village, don't pretend you are successful if your debate or if a crisis does not succeed in bringing brothers and sisters together at the end of the quarrel. We should come back to our culture, and Africa has a culture of consensus.
Considered as a social risk and discrimination, the electoral period always seemed to leave the female folk vulnerable, whether before, during, or after elections. Thus, the need for a Women's Situation Room, a laudable initiative that is considered as a step to a peaceful electoral period.
What do you think about
it? It is something very important and very worthy. I think a woman is not supposed to keep in the kitchen. It is not their duty. In our traditions, of course, you would not see any woman talk outside, but before the man goes to talk, he has the device or the advice. He is advised by her wife, because the wife is in the field. She goes to look for water. She goes in the fields with other women. She is informed as for anything which is going on in the village. And she would, just keep her husband and tell him, mind you, you are going there to talk. This is the situation. If you talk of this, mind this and that. Women are very instrumental in the survival of any society. We should pay attention to that.
Rich intellectually, participants were given the opportunity to make tangible propositions as to the operationalization of the recommendations for the Women's Situation Room during the election periods in Cameroon.
And as a follow-up of that report, the need for a peaceful elections in Cameroon starts with the identification of some possible factors of conflict in an electoral period. Professor Shaliga Brembok highlights on the different aspects of conflict in the following excerpt as prepared by Rael Ule Abia.
I would classify them into three dimensions. First of all, before elections, we have violations, not yet violence. And when the law are organized to violate the rights of people, what people are supposed to do freely, if they are not in a capacity to freely express themselves, it's a violation. This can drive into violence. And the Electoral Code is one of these violence generator, because people feel frustrated. If you cannot get your ID card in due time, if you cannot get your electoral card in due time at the right place, they send your card somewhere else and it is even lost. It's a violation which can push people into violence because they feel deeply frustrated. Now, social violence can be driven by the fact that administration is organized to protect X and violate Y. This discrepancy is a violation of the rights of candidates. Why protect X and frustrate Y or Z? These administrative violations is, likely to provoke violence during elections. And the third dimension is that laws are so tricky that most of the time violations are legalized. When you voice a situation, they fish out the law to tell you it is in the law. But how are the laws passed in our country? Violations are legalized, and this is a trigger to violence. These three dimensions should.
We hope such peaceful elections are realized in our country. This year's World Day to Combat Desertification has been commemorated with focus on sustainable land management as a way to regenerate economies, create jobs, and revitalize communities. Desertification has been a major environmental problem, especially in poor communities. Philip Sote in the following report says it is a problem that can be handled through judicious management. His report.
The World Day to Combat Desertification is a unique moment to remind the international community that land degradation neutrality is achievable through problem solving, strong community involvement, and cooperation at all levels. This is possible through spending money on organic and fairly traded products to avoid land degradation, making a pledge to protect and conserve the value of land, supporting a sustainable way of living, producing, and consuming. More so because as land begins to degrade, the benefits it once provided begin to diminish and the climate can be affected due to many forms of land degradation, and this releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, thus provoking climate change. Africa, a region already feeling the impact of poverty and climate change, is most vulnerable to the phenomenon of desertification. Often, communities affected by desertification develop survival strategies to attend to urgent needs, and this tends to worsen desertification in such areas. It is not, however, a hopeless situation. Communities can come together to plant trees and try new farming methods that can help to halt desertification.
A workshop in order to popularize capacity buildings through the International Labour Standard took place today in Douala by the representative of the Ministry of Labour and Social Security with regional and divisional delegates. The idea was to promote decent work, social justice, fight against discrimination in the world of labour. Our reporter Nde Vanessa was part of that workshop and now reports.
This awareness-raising workshop on the International Labour Organization Convention ratified by Cameroon is to promote a decent work program for all working class. The overall aim is to promote opportunities for women and men to obtain decent and productive work in free conditions, equality, security, and human dignity. It's out to ensure that the rights of workers are respected through the conventions that will be ratified.
To try to ensure that workers who are being exploited and that the rights of workers are protected. That's the mission of the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. As you know, there are two conventions that are in the process of being ratified. That is Convention number 144 on tripartite consultations and 155 on health and safety. Those are the things that are going to be discussed upon.
The Ministry of Labour and Social Security is out to enforce these obligations, though they are not sufficiently known and mastered by the populace, particularly the actors of the world of work who fail to inform the various actors who are proactive.
Call on employers to let us know, or trade unions. If you identify a problem somewhere, it is important for them to notify us, and that is why we have staff representatives in companies. The work of a staff rep is to be able to let us know, even trade unions, to let us know the problems that are existing on the field. If there's a problem there, or the rights of a worker is being threatened, it is important for them to let us know at the level of the regional delegation or the level of the divisional delegation.
Despite all the numerous actions undertaken by the government with the support of international and national officers, much work still needs to be done, especially in terms of raising awareness, publicizing capacity building and chains of actions, carry out public campaigns with the regional and divisional delegates of Labour and Social Security, who were all present to make the implementation very visible.
And that is why we're having this program today, this workshop today. And you would notice that all the regional delegates is in 3 phases actually, because we had one in Kribi. We're having one now where we've invited the regional delegates and divisional delegates of Northwest and West. And then the last phase will be in Gaundere, North, that will involve the North and Grand North, Far North. And so all these regional delegates will be informed. And you know that it's tripartite. That's why you have employers, you have Shikam being represented, because through them also we can be able to publicize. These are awareness raising meeting.
It is important to recall that, according to statistics released by the National Social Insurance Fund, 3,225 industrial accidents and 1 occupational disease were recorded in 2011. 2,925 industrial accidents and 7 occupational disease in 2012, and 3,121 industrial accidents against 5 occupational disease in 2013. They are therefore faced with a silent epidemic largely caused by the actors in the workplace. This workshop is all in a bid to raise awareness among employers and workers in order to improve occupational hazard rate and allow public administration to have a better control, reversing their impact on the economy and the society.
And over in the Center region, the Yaoundé Rehabilitation Center for people living with disabilities now has a new Director General. Alexander Manga was installed last Monday in Yaoundé during a ceremony presided over by the Minister of Social Affairs, Pauline Irene Ngene. Baongo Francis reports from Yaoundé.
Here is the new Director General of the Cardinal Paul Emile Lega National Center for Rehabilitation of Persons Living with Disabilities based in Yaoundé. Alexander Manga, who was nominated by presidential decree of 18 June 2018, was put into his fresh functions this Monday at the center by the Minister of Social Affairs, Pauline Irene Ngene, who doubles as the board chair of this government structure. The 65-year-old new Director General, who had for 8 years been the Deputy Director General of this rehabilitation center, comes in to succeed from Grace Formulu, who has enjoyed a 14 years reign. The colorful ceremony, animated by an impaired musical star, added the ambience, which was attended by a cross-section of important personalities. Love and encouragement from family and colleagues was shown towards Alexander Manga as he took the command baton of this public establishment involved in health and social activities, equipped with legal personalities, and which is financially independent. His happiness was quite visible.
I am so happy because God has permitted that the head of state gave me the occasion to take into charge a person living with disabilities. May he himself continue to bless me in these missions.
The new head shall work towards achieving the principal missions of the center, which is to put in place a governmental policy to rehabilitate and reconvert persons living with disabilities. But for the moment, he has immediate key areas to handle.
It will be to install peace in between human resources, because peace was lost. This is my first aim. The second aim will be to modernize the gestion, okay, the management of the resources, and the third one to try to follow, to work with other non-governmental organizations.
Alexander Manga, born on the 3rd of April 1965 in Garwa, is an orthopedist and traumatological surgeon by qualification. He is happily married and is a father of 4 kids.
We remain in the Center region. A convention geared toward an exchange in techniques and methodologies to better address research results around HIV and AIDS and other health complications was signed yesterday in Yaoundé. This was between the Chantal Biya International Reference Center and the Yaoundé Gynecological and Orthopedic and Pediatrics Hospital. Professor Alexis Njolo signed for the Chantal Biya International Reference Center, while Professor Fru Angwafo III signed for the Pediatrics Hospital. This new partnership shall see the Pediatric Hospital enjoy from the expertise of the Chantal Biya International Center, which is a sub-regional reference center in matters of research. Let us now have the reaction of the head of this hospital at the end of the convention, as selected by Baongo Francis in Yaoundé.
There are gaps in our diagnostic capabilities. Here at the center, we found out that these gaps can easily be taken care of. You have biotechnological, biomolecular, genomic studies carried on here, and our center has as targets population, children and women. We have been in the process of looking at congenital malformations and other rare diseases in children, And to better understand these diseases, we need both fundamental and clinical research capacity. This is what CRCB is giving us.
We move over to the East region. 360 voters are expected to get themselves registered in the electoral list in that part of the country before the upcoming elections in Cameroon. This is a task given to ELECAM members in Betua by the Director General of Elections Cameroon. Wamba Tansi Mirabel reports.
The Director General of Elections Cameroon, Eno Abraham Egwe, has urged his collaborators to keep aside their differences and work in synergy for best results in the upcoming elections in the country. He was speaking during a working visit recently in Betua, during which he applauded the effort of ELECAM members in the East region who, despite all the hurdles, have stayed calm and focused on the daunting task bestowed on them, a task which is to ensure that 360 voters get themselves registered in the electoral list. It was also a platform for the regional delegate of ELECAM in the East region to pinpoint some of the challenges they have been facing.
I had in my speech put forward some problems encountered by our collaborators on the field. The first problem was concerning the access, the distance access to some communal antenna.
At the level of security, the land of the rising sun has been witnessing unrest. A group of armed men from the Central African Republic who always perturb the peace of some Cameroonians in Betua.
For the security, we appreciate the measures taken by administrative authorities to help ELECAM do its job.
However, at the close of the meeting, administrative authorities were called upon to work alongside the local population to dissolve this group of armed men.
We move over to the Far North region. A workshop on standard quality product organized by ANOR took place recently in that part of the country. The meeting that took place at the council hall in Marwa was presided at by the governor of that region, Medjiawa Bakari. Seka Zubairatu reports from Marwa.
After 3 other sessions that took place in Ebolova, Betua, and Buya, Marwa was chosen as next on the list by ANO, an organ that fight against non-standard products to promote and sensitize the population of Far North on quality products. The Far North region, that is a commercial center between Nigeria and Chad, is flooded regularly with non-quality products. According to the governor of the region, Cameroon has values and potentials to compete in the business market with the world at large.
We have an occasion, an important occasion for our companies and enterprise to learn what government have put at their disposal in order to target us, the other companies of the world.
To him, it is an opportunity for Cameroonians.
It's a sort of advertisement. They have to send the message to the entire world that here in Far North we have also product who is competitive with other people.
For consumers, it is an initiative that needs to be promoted, given that it will help them distinguish between contraband and quality products.
We talk some education news. The Institut Universitaire de la Côte has graduated some 91 students from different faculties of the Higher School of Learning. The event that took place at their campus in Lok Beso was attended by administrative authorities, partners, parents, and students. Raul Ule Abia was there and put together the following.
It was with pomp and fanfare that these 91 students from the 5 schools marched into the Amphi 500 at the Institut Universitaire de la Côte. They are the 7th batch of students from the International Trade Program, ISUGA, the 9th batch of Licence Sciences et Technologies, the the fourth batch of Polytech Nancy, the second of Architecture and Industrial Design, and the pioneer batch of students from the School of Biomedical Engineering, all faculties at the Institut Universitaire de la Côte. They are graduating today with a bachelor's degree after 2 years and 3 years of hard work.
It was very difficult, but together we have proved that we can evolve together, and we have proved that we are the best. Yes, with our director, Madam Mrs. Tage Nadine, it was not very easy, but now we take our diploma and we are very happy.
This is an opportunity to emphasize that new days are coming up for us, with new challenges, new difficulties, and new encounters. It is also important to realize that we are the representative of Institut Universitaire de la Côte and the Cameroon, especially outside the borders of our beautiful countries.
They were awarded prizes for their best performances in different projects, both academically as well as national competition. Having lived the moment of delight and gotten the grasp of the goodness of education, some of them entail continuing with their studies while others are going into the job market.
We are going to continue our study. Me particularly, I'm going to continue in Italy, but many of my friends will go to continue in India or in France. Yes, there are many partners for our school.
Placed under a program PST, which is the International Engineering Program that provides the possibility for these students to have entrance into foreign institutions of higher learning. The performance of the students and their enthusiasm left the partners of EUC with a good impression.
I'm really impressed by the students. They are so professional and so full of energy that I'm sure that they are going to explode everything on the employment market very soon. Some of them are going to find a job here, some others are going to travel abroad to study. So it's going to be really good for all of them, I think.
I just would like to say that this student will be very welcome in France, and I'm very proud to be today their parrain in France, and I would like to welcome them, every one of them in France, to continue their studies, and I say just good luck for them in their life.
A feeling well shared by the founding president, Mr. Paul Ngimezap, and his collaborators. Having gone through bad and pleasant moments at the institution, the students could only urge others to take up studies at the Institut Universitaire de la Côte.
IUC is the best school to have a good formation. So people who want a good formation can come here in IUC. Yes.
In their euphoria and merrymaking, the students were reminded that this was only the beginning of a long journey to success.
And now we talk some news out of our borders. In foreign news, as the European Union struggles with the ongoing migrant crisis, the bloc is preparing for a short two-day summit to discuss the top issues beginning on Tuesday in Brussels. The difference between the member states over migration policy is threatening to tear the group apart, as we hear in the following report courtesy of VOA.
More than 100 migrants rescued by a cargo ship off Libya were finally disembarked in Pozzallo, Sicily, Tuesday, having spent 4 days at sea, as Italy initially refused to let the vessel dock.
Since time could have consequences on a humanitarian level, today I appealed to the Italian Interior Minister, Matteo Salvini, who today decided to let the migrants disembark.
Salvini, the head of the far-right Lega party that is part of Italy's governing coalition, visited Libya Monday and reiterated Rome's demands, blocking migrant boats and rescue vessels, the sharing of migrant quotas across the European Union, and asylum centres set up in Africa. His hardline stance threatens a major rift with EU allies.
Now Salvini in particular would really like to have a monumental failure at EU level, because that would suit his narrative about Europe, about migration and about Italy itself and about political elites, because that's really his story.
Trying to keep the EU stitched together is Europe's traditional political core, the Franco-German alliance. Facing domestic pressures on immigration, Germany's Chancellor Merkel convened an emergency meeting on migration Sunday, but it was boycotted by several eastern EU states that are refusing to take in quotas of refugees.
In fact, migration is much less of an issue in real terms this year than last, because the number of migrants coming into the European Union has dropped by half. It's a trickle in comparison with what happened in 2015 to 16. That doesn't mean nothing should be done. In fact, the EU needs to have a much more comprehensive approach.
Migration threatens to dominate a summit aimed at addressing several other issues, like Eurozone reform and security cooperation led by France. 9 EU states this week signed off on a joint European military force for rapid deployment in times of crisis. Britain offered its backing, hoping to maintain defence ties as it leaves the EU. Progress in so-called Brexit talks has stalled, raising fears Britain may crash out next March without a deal.
Brexit, I think, is a fairly low priority for most of the other EU 27. It's kind of a pain. It's a technical question that requires a lot of bandwidth. But actually, there are these existential issues facing the European Union that actually have nothing to do with Britain.
Last year, EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker spoke of a wind in Europe's sails, but storm clouds are gathering that once more threaten to sink European unity, and some fear the EU itself. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
And in sports, football, the Super Eagles of Nigeria have been eliminated out of the ongoing FIFA World Cup in Russia by Argentina. They lost their third outing by 1-2, but the African side thought they were deserving of a second penalty when Marcos Rojo touched the ball with his arm. But the central referee, Konex Kakir, refused to give a spot kick even after consulting the video assistance referee. This decision has been a subject of debate between or among supporters of football. Ate Bonaventure sampled the opinion of some Nigerian supporters, and this is what they have to say concerning their country's elimination. We'll take the excerpt of Nigeria about the Vox Pop of Nigeria about their country's elimination.
The performance was okay, but the finisher. But all they want is to draw their match and they got win. But yesterday it was very difficult that they did not make it. But the opportunity they have, they could not make use of it. So
the problem is not the ref. The ref they blow the whistle normal. It does not blow against anyone. So the problem is for our players. Nigerian players, they try as much as possible to win the match.
The match of Nigeria and Argentina, I was very, very annoyed with the referee because Nigeria was supposed to kick another penalty, but the referee didn't allow them that opportunity. So I don't know what is very wrong. Or is it because we are having a black color that the referee, they minimize us? They don't want Africa to go ahead in football.
What the referee did is no good. But for me, I would like them to play the match and change the official. Another referee will watch them. What the referee did was no good. It was right the referee to do what he did.
It was very good, but the referee spoiled the match as for me because the referee favored the Argentinians.
That is football. There must be a loser and there must be a winner. So for the ongoing match between Switzerland and Costa Rica, they are tied on one goal on either side. They are already playing the second half of the match. Brazil is leading Serbia 2-0. We'll be bringing you details of these stories up next in our subsequent edition of the news. The next newscast will be coming up in the French language with Luc Serge Didier Nang at 9 p.m. As for me, we'll be together again tomorrow at the same time for what would have made news. Until then, good night.